The media has also lied about RFK Jr. No, he did not eat a dog. And they want everyone to think that he's a crazy anti-vaxxer. His views on vaccines are much more nuanced than that, and they're ones that a lot of Americans would agree with.
I've never been anti-vaccine. I'm called anti-vaccine because that's a way of kind of marginalizing and discrediting me. But what I've said is I'm pro-science and pro-safety, and we ought to subject vaccines, which are mandated for healthy children, not for sick people. We ought to subject them to at least the kind of rigorous placebo-controlled trials that are mandated for every other medicine. It's the only medicine that's exempt from pre-licensing safety trial.
I believe we should have safe vaccines, and I believe we should have robust science, and I believe that we should have independent regulators who are not financially tied to the companies that make our vaccines. There's a couple of problems with vaccines. I had 3 vaccines as a kid. Today's kids get 72. And the reason they get so many is because they're so profitable. And they were made profitable in 1986 when Congress passed a law that said you can't sue a vaccine company. So no matter how toxic the ingredient, no matter how negligent the company, no matter how grievous your injury, you can't sue them, which means that company has no incentive to make them safer. And remember, the 4 companies that make all 72 of the vaccines that are now mandated for our kids are all serial felons.
He has been especially critical of COVID vaccines, but his viewpoints are backed by numerous scientific studies and statements from highly qualified scientists and doctors. I will link to a comprehensive article about that below. Part of the reason you haven't heard more about these studies or highly qualified scientists and doctors is that big pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer have so much money that they can advertise on all the corporate media outlets, so they can prevent certain stories from ever going out. And by the way, the media has suggested that Kennedy is some kind of grifter who went into anti-vaccine advocacy for the money. But if anything, speaking out against vaccines is obviously a risk for anybody's reputation and earning potential. Until RFK Jr. became a so-called anti-vaxxer, he was well regarded as an environmental lawyer. As a Kennedy, he could have coasted on his name and lived out his days comfortably. It's much more likely that he would have earned more money by never saying anything about vaccines. I encourage you to actually listen to what he has to say in his own words. For example, here's a 45-minute speech he gave when he suspended his presidential campaign and announced that he was backing Trump. I'll link to that below.